Even the stench of poverty has invaded this court, mocked a man in an expensive suit, sparking loud laughter all around. Eyes turned instantly to the back of the room, where a barefoot girl in a torn dress, with messy hair, walked in holding her mother's hand. She tried to hide behind her mother's skirt, but every laugh echoed deep in her fragile chest. The elite women fanned themselves with ornate fans, whispering as if the girl's presence were an offense. "Look, they even brought the thief's daughter to witness her father's shame," one said loudly enough for all to hear. The crowd erupted in more laughter, turning the child's pain into a spectacle. The courtroom felt more like a stage for displaying power than a place of justice. Cold marble walls reflected the light from tall windows, and red carpets highlighted the distance between rich and poor. On one side, lawyers in suits and influential families. On the other, poorly dressed peasants huddled at the back, trying to disappear. Inequality was visible, cruel, and suffocating. With every step, the girl felt the cutting stares like knives judging her existence. A young man in a suit, noticing her, pointed to her bare feet and said loudly, "If she doesn't even have shoes, what right does she think she has to be heard here?" The comment was met with booming laughter that thundered across the hall. Guards dragged the shackled defendant, displaying him like a hunted trophy. His weary face revealed not only the pain of false accusations, but also the shame of his daughter witnessing such humiliation. Murmurs grew louder. "Criminal! Vermin! Rot in prison!" Words like blades pierced the girl's heart. The judge, seated on his dark wooden chair, watched with disdain. His cold face looked carved from stone, incapable of compassion. When his eyes met the girl's, he raised an eyebrow and smirked. A small gesture, but devastating. It said, "You don't belong here." The mother squeezed her daughter's hand, more out of despair than protection. They both knew nothing just would happen there, that the man's fate was sealed before the trial began. This court didn't judge, it confirmed what the rich demanded. Justice there was just an empty word. As lawyers prepared, the audience laughed as though watching a play. Every word from the prosecutor struck like a blow, while each weak response from the defense drew scorn. The girl, however, never looked away from the judge. She didn't just see arrogance, she saw a challenge she would have to face. The prosecutor painted her father as a cruel man, unworthy of freedom. The girl felt tears burning but refused to let them fall. In her heart, something stronger than shame was igniting, a flame born of suffering. In that courtroom, where everyone laughed at her, a promise began to form. She didn't know how, but she knew she would fulfill it. And when she spoke, it wouldn't be only to defend her father, but to prove that even the most powerful man in that room would fall before a child. The clinking of chains echoed as the defendant was brought in. His steps were slow and dragging, carrying not only iron but injustice. Some spectators whistled mockingly, as if an animal had been brought to a circus. Each sound of shackles triggered new laughter. Shame was paraded as entertainment. His face bore the marks of a life of hard labor, hands calloused from building homes for others, now branded as a thief's hands. He dared not raise his eyes, knowing only scorn awaited. "Look closely at this man," the prosecutor shouted. "A danger to society." The crowd reacted as though hearing divine judgment. His wife, seated among the poor, clutched their daughter tightly, trying to shield her. But even her arms couldn't block the insults hurled from all sides. "This man should rot in jail," someone yelled, prompting fresh laughter. The girl trembled but never looked away from her father. The judge sat like a king on his throne, silent and imposing. He showed no hurry, already in full control of the defendant's fate. His cold gaze swept over the man as if he were nothing. Each gesture declared, nothing could change the outcome already decided. The prosecutor launched into his speech, painting the man as a monster unfit for society. His sharp voice was designed to crush all hope. Each sentence drew murmurs of approval. The trial resembled a lynching more than a search for truth. The court-appointed defense lawyer rose half-heartedly. His words were weak, lifeless, mere formality. No one listened. Some even yawned. It was clear. This man was utterly alone, abandoned by all, even by the one meant to defend him. At the back, the girl bit her lip until it bled. Her tear-filled eyes searched for humanity in the judge. but all she saw was stone and arrogance. And with every second, the flame within her grew, fueled by mockery and cowardice. The prosecutor, in theatrical fashion, pointed at the defendant. "Look at this vermin. This is what happens when someone dares to defy order." The hall erupted in applause. The man lowered his head, crushed by lies. The girl clenched her fists, unable to accept it. Something within her screamed for justice. The mother whispered, trying to restrain her. "Don't say anything, my little one, or they'll laugh even more." But silence hurt more than insults. The girl's heart pounded fiercely in her chest. She knew that if she stayed quiet, she would lose her father forever. In the midst of her greatest humiliation, she made a silent decision. No matter how many mocked her, when her moment came, she would speak, and her voice, fragile yet firm, would rise louder than all the lies in that courtroom. When the girl tried to approach her father, a guard shoved her back harshly. "Stay in your place, brat," he shouted, drawing laughter from the crowd. She nearly fell but held tightly to her mother's hand. Her small body trembled, not from fear, but from indignation. "Look at that," sneered a well-dressed woman. No respect, just like her father, insolent and uneducated. The audience murmured in agreement, as though each insult were an undeniable truth. The girl's skin burned with shame, but she never looked away from her shackled father. She tried to speak, but her voice was drowned in laughter. "Even the thief's daughter wants to defend the criminal," mocked a young man in a suit. Laughter roared like thunder, echoing off marble walls. Each sound was an open wound in the child's soul as she fought back tears. From above, the judge watched, indifferent, almost amused. His cold smile made it clear he would not stop the humiliation. To him, it was part of the show. The girl felt like nothing more than a puppet in a cruel theater where her pain was applauded. The guards, sensing her defiance, tightened their watch. One muttered to another, "If she speaks again, I'll drag her out." The crowd heard and laughed as if it were a joke. Her mother pulled her close, trying to shield her, but the girl's heart was already burning with revolt. She looked at her father, bowed and crushed by shame. His face seemed to beg forgiveness for her suffering, but she saw no shame in him, only injustice. And that injustice burned inside her like an unquenchable fire. Meanwhile, the prosecutor piled on insults. If the daughter already shows such lack of composure, imagine what she learned at home. Of course she's the daughter of a thief. The audience erupted as if this were the final proof. The girl shut her eyes, fighting tears. The wealthy women mocked, saying she should be sent to an orphanage away from her disgraceful father. Men laughed loudly as if the idea were hilarious. Her mother tried to cover her ears, but there was no escaping the cruelty. Every word, every laugh, every look of contempt weighed down on her shoulders. But instead of crushing her, that weight shaped her courage. She knew now she could not remain silent. In the quiet of her heart, she swore she would find her voice. A voice strong enough to silence a courtroom that mocked the poor. The judge, in his spotless black robe, raised his chin and struck the gavel hard. The sound boomed like thunder, demanding silence. But it wasn't respect. It was fear. Everyone knew this man had the power to destroy lives with a single word. He leaned forward, staring at the defendant with icy eyes. "This man is a danger to society," he declared, drawing applause from the crowd. His voice was firm, but dripping with disdain like a sentence already written. Seeing the girl, the judge raised an eyebrow. "And you dare bring this child to witness your shame?" he said loudly, addressing the father. The courtroom exploded in laughter. The girl's face burned, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she stared the judge down. He noticed her gaze and smirked, mixing mockery with superiority. "Insolent eyes for someone who shouldn't even be here," he muttered, just loud enough to be heard. The audience cheered the insult as if it were rehearsed. The father, powerless, could not speak in his defense. With each accusation, he sank further, stripped of dignity. His daughter, however, refused to accept silent defeat. Deep in her chest, she felt she could still change everything. The judge carried on theatrically, moving like an actor in his own play. His robe swayed and his voice filled the hall. He wasn't seeking truth, he was flaunting power, crushing resistance. The prosecutor reinforced his words like a loyal squire. The defense lawyer, meanwhile, shrank into silence. The outcome was already written, and everyone knew it. This court did not seek justice, and only a verdict. But the girl saw more than arrogance. She noticed something hidden, a shadow in the judge's eyes, something no one else seemed to catch. And that shadow was the crack in the stone wall. She didn't know what it was yet, but felt it in her soul. That crack could be the key to breaking him. And in that moment, as the judge smiled arrogantly, the girl understood her fate. She would confront the man of stone. "Silence that child before she ruins the show," roared the prosecutor. Laughter swelled like a fire fed by cruelty. The girl hunched her shoulders, but never looked away from her father. The judge leaned forward, feigning curiosity, like studying an insect. "Show some manners, girl, or I'll have you swept out of here." The mother tugged at her arm, whispering pleas. "Don't bring us more shame, my child." She almost wept. The crowd laughed at the woman's simple pain. "Teach her to beg not to speak in court," someone jeered. The girl breathed deeply, swallowing the pain like poison. The defendant lifted his eyes for the first time, silently apologizing. His face said, "Don't fight," fearing things would worsen. But the girl's impulse had already turned into fire. She felt injustice tearing at her throat from within. Remaining silent seemed crueler than being expelled. The prosecutor slammed the table theatrically. "This man is a danger. Look at the offspring he raised." The crowd applauded like beasts hungry for punishment. "It's proof that crime runs in the family," he insisted. Each word fell like a stone on the child's chest. A guard approached, clearing space with his shoulder. "One more sound and I'll drag you out," he hissed. The girl nodded, but inside she screamed no. Her father bit his lips, holding back tears. Her mother shut her eyes, bracing for the next blow. The judge shuffled papers as if they were trivial. "Let's proceed, we've wasted enough on sentimentality." His tone was cold, devoid of any humanity. "The poor don't need defense, they need limits," he said. The room buzzed with cruel agreement. The defense lawyer stood, timid as a candle in the wind. He mumbled a few lifeless lines. The laughter drowned any attempt at argument. "Are you done?" The judge cut in, eyebrow raised. The lawyer shrank, smaller than when he entered. The girl felt her anger solidify into resolve. Each insult pushed her a step forward. She counted heartbeats to keep from bursting. She wanted to speak without crying, strike without breaking. She wanted to touch the place where the law hid its fear. The prosecutor pointed at the defendant again, ecstatic. "A man like this taints everything he touches." He pointed at the girl as if pointing to trash. "There's the future we must prevent." The room roared with laughter, beasts scenting blood. The girl straightened her back, refusing to falter. Her knees shook, but she stood tall. She knew the next step would be irreversible. There, something greater than shame was born. There, the unbelievable promise was made. "If you open your mouth, I'll drag you out right now," threatened the guard. The girl looked at her father and saw a silent plea. She looked at the judge and saw a stone wall. She looked inside herself and found a thread of light. Then she took the step no one expected. She raised her hand, small but firm like a hammer. The room erupted in laughter before she even spoke. "Wants to talk, the little beggar?" mocked a man. "Let her. The circus just got funnier," another shouted. But the girl spoke anyway, unshaken. "Release my father, and I will make you kneel." The word sliced the air like a silent blade. For a second, the courtroom forgot how to laugh. The judge blinked, confused, as if hearing heresy. Then the crowd roared in vengeful laughter. "Look at the barefoot prophetess," the prosecutor jeered. "Bring down a judge with those dirty feet?" they mocked. The girl locked her eyes on the magistrate. She didn't answer the crowd or their hatred. She answered the fear she refused to keep inside. The judge slammed his gavel, furious at her audacity. "Silence, or I'll throw you out at once." "I repeat," the girl said, her voice iron. "Release my father, and I will make you kneel." The echo sealed an invisible pact. Her mother wept, sure everything had worsened. Her father shook his head, denying the promise. He knew hunger, but not miracles. The girl knew hunger, but she knew faith. And in that clash, two worlds collided. The prosecutor smiled, sensing theatrical opportunity. The girl has wagered against justice itself. Shall we record it in the minutes, Your Honor? The crowd cheered, demanding the full spectacle. The judge smirked, finding it pathetic. You want to humiliate me, child? Asked the judge. I want to reveal what you hide, she replied. A murmur swept the hall like a cold wind. And what could I hide from people like you? Perhaps from yourself, she said, eyes unwavering. The judge clenched his jaw, struck by her words. His laugh came out short, nervous rather than cruel. Let's move on. Enough childish fantasies. But his voice no longer sounded so secure. Something inside him had cracked. The girl lowered her hand, but not her head. She knew she had crossed a point of no return. From laughter came silence. From silence came tension. Her promise now hung in the air like a blade. And everyone waited, secretly fearing the first cut. The courtroom took a few seconds to recover from the girl's boldness. When the laughter returned, it was harsher and louder. Did you hear that? The little beggar thinks she'll topple the judge. Each word was venom, meant to crush her courage. But her phrase had already left invisible marks in the air. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Yet inside, something hammered relentlessly. I will make you kneel, echoed like a stubborn whisper. It was absurd, impossible, but it touched something hidden. His face stiffened, though his hands trembled faintly. The prosecutor seized the moment. Your Honor, look at this child's insolence. It is the reflection of her criminal father's upbringing. The crowd applauded as if well-trained beasts. Her mother hugged her tightly, but she stood firm. Some in the audience whispered doubts. It was rare to see someone so small face giants. Has she lost her mind? Asked a woman. Or does she truly believe it? Asked another. Questions spread like sparks of doubt. The judge slammed his gavel hard for silence. Enough of childish fantasies, he barked, but his voice was weaker than before. The child had touched something he didn't understand, and it rattled him more than mockery ever could. The girl stood still, watching the judge closely. She knew her words had cracked his mask. Small as she was, she recognized hidden wounds, and in his cold eyes, she saw a fracture. That gave her even more strength. The audience craved more spectacle. Let her speak, it's amusing, some shouted. Others begged her to repeat the phrase. But the judge held back, fearing her words. A fear he would never admit, even to himself. The defendant watched, tears welling. Pride and dread warred inside him. He knew each word put her at risk. But also that her fire could not be stopped. Maybe it was the only salvation left. The echo of the promise lingered. A shadow no laughter could erase. Mockery only made it stronger. Every heart carried the same doubt. What if she was telling the truth? The prosecutor rose in fury, his robe shaking. This child cannot remain here, he shouted. She is tainting the seriousness of this court. The audience stood applauding, demanding her removal. The judge watched, torn between ridicule and unease. Her mother begged softly for silence. Please, don't say another word, they'll destroy us. Tears streamed uncontrollably down her weary face. She couldn't bear her daughter being attacked. But the girl stood unyielding, a rock in the storm. Suddenly, a voice rose from the back. Let her speak, cried an old man. His tone clashed with the furious mob. Some turned in outrage, others whispered in surprise. For the first time someone defended her. Another voice murmured, almost ashamed. Maybe she should be heard. Just a moment. The timid words cracked the crowd's rhythm. Doubt began to spread like sparks, and unanimity in the court broke apart. The prosecutor slammed the table desperately. Don't listen to childish delusions, he barked, but his voice trembled more than it commanded. Fear showed through his mask of authority, and many caught the weakness. The girl lifted her voice, stronger now. I am not here to play. I am here for truth. Silence fell heavily across the room. Laughter died into hushed murmurs. All eyes turned to the judge. The magistrate breathed deeply, struggling to compose himself. Enough, or I'll have you all expelled, he threatened. His robe shook as if containing his anger. But behind his mask were growing cracks, and the girl saw it plainly. The accused father watched in awe. His daughter faced the court with impossible courage. For an instant, he believed miracles were real. Hope flickered in his despair, and he clung to it like life itself. In the chaos, the girl smiled faintly, not because she was winning, but because she endured. Every word was a victory over humiliation, and she realized she wasn't speaking just for her father. She was speaking for everyone. The judge adjusted his robe, breathing deeply before lifting his head high. "Let us bring order to this farce," he sneered. The courtroom erupted in applause and laughter, hailing him as a king. But the girl's promise still lingered in silence, and that silence weighed heavier than the noise. He leaned forward, fixing his gaze on the child. "You have an answer for everything, don't you?" he mocked. "Tell me, how can a dirty little girl change the law?" The audience roared with laughter at the insult. But the girl held her ground, eyes steady as steel. "I don't want to change the law," she declared. "I want to change you." The words fell like a stone. Laughter froze, momentarily disarmed. The judge smirked, pretending calm. But a flicker of unease betrayed him. The prosecutor rose theatrically, rallying the crowd. "Look, gentlemen, an insolent child defying the court." A clear reflection of her father's delinquency. The crowd laughed again, but not as one. Mockery mingled with doubt. The judge raised his hand, commanding silence. His tone returned cold, sharp, merciless. "One more word, and you'll be expelled." But deep down, he craved to hear more. And the audience, too, hungered for it. The girl drew a deep breath, fighting tears. She knew every word could be her last, but she could not surrender to pressure. Her father's eyes begged her for hope, and that hope kept her standing tall. The judge leaned back, feigning composure. "Let us proceed, enough foolishness." But the papers in his hands blurred. Her words echoed relentlessly in his mind. The harder he resisted, the louder they returned. The audience murmured in division. Some scoffed at her childish insolence. Others recognized courage in her defiance. Every eye turned to the judge. Would he truly endure to the end? Beneath his pristine robe, the judge bore old scars. Memories of a poor childhood he tried to erase. In the girl, he saw a reflection of himself. Each word cut open wounds he had buried. Arrogance was his armor against the past. The child unknowingly struck his deepest place. She wasn't speaking just to the judge. She was speaking to the boy he once was. A boy humiliated, broken, hardened. A boy who swore never to be shamed again. The judge shuffled papers, feigning composure, but his hands trembled against the wood. The prosecutor whispered, urging firmness. "Don't let yourself be manipulated by a child." But the seed was already planted. The girl watched him closely and spoke softly. "I know you've suffered too." The words fell like thunder in the hall. Some laughed, dismissing her boldness, but others shivered, unsettled. For a moment, the judge's proud posture faltered. He looked smaller than his robe, and in the silence, truth stripped him bare. The defendant wept, proud of his daughter. She carried the family's burden alone. The judge inhaled, fighting for control. But memory dragged him backward. He remembered hunger, taunts, shame. He remembered his vow never to be humiliated. And the girl was tearing off that mask. The prosecutor, alarmed, intervened. "Your Honor, don't fall for emotional tricks. She spins nothing but childish fictions." The crowd applauded, but weakly. Doubt had already poisoned the air. The girl stood unshaken. She knew she had pierced deep, and in her mind, her vow repeated, "I will make you kneel." It no longer seemed impossible. The courtroom, once filled with mockery, fell breathless. After the girl's last words, laughter died into heavy silence. All eyes fixed on the judge, waiting for his reaction. But he sat frozen, battling something he wouldn't reveal. His eyes held a shadow that unsettled even the proud. The audience murmured, restless with the scene. Some laughed nervously, trying to break the tension. But their voices were drowned by the weight in the air. "How can a child shake him so deeply?" they whispered. No one dared speak too loud. The judge shuffled papers but read nothing. Letters blurred before his clouded eyes. His mind drifted to memories he buried. The girl's words pulled them back. His stone mask was cracking. The prosecutor tried to intervene theatrically. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't let childish feelings distract us." But his voice sounded forced, almost desperate. Even he felt things slipping away. Confidence was crumbling with the crowd's laughter. The mother hugged her daughter, weeping softly. She cried not only from fear but also hope. She knew her child had touched something deep. Though she didn't understand how, she sensed change. The impossible was taking form. The girl's gaze never left the judge. Each second of silence was a silent victory. She knew her promise echoed within him. With each heartbeat, her fire grew. The confrontation was just beginning. The crowd demanded spectacle, impatient. "Give us the sentence already," some shouted. Others preferred the silence, intrigued. The room split between mockery and expectation. That division was proof of change. The judge slammed his gavel, seeking control. But the sound rang weak, without power. "Proceed," he said, voice trembling. Everyone noticed the shift in tone. The stone man no longer seemed unbreakable. The defendant raised his eyes at last. On the judge's face he saw something new. Doubt. And for the first time, hope stirred. His daughter wasn't speaking in vain. She spoke with power. The judge wiped sweat from his brow in the cold hall. He tried to hold posture, but his body betrayed him. Each word dragged him to childhood. The poor, humiliated boy awoke inside. And that ghost consumed him before all. The prosecutor cried out, desperate for order. "Your Honor, don't fall for illusions." But his words were drowned by rising murmurs. The audience sensed something extraordinary. No one wanted to miss it. Suddenly the judge rose with papers in hand. "Enough!" he shouted, but his voice was frail. The robe shook upon his shoulders. He seemed small, vulnerable, broken. Silence fell heavy like a shroud. The girl stepped forward, unafraid. "I told you I'd make you kneel," she repeated. Her eyes burned like fire in the dark. There was no fear, only certainty, and that certainty destroyed him. The crowd split between laughter and awe. "Throw her out already," some yelled. Others stood frozen, mesmerized. It was like witnessing the impossible. Something undeniable. The judge staggered, gripping the desk. His legs weakened, battling himself. Pride clashed against exposed wounds, and pride was losing. The crowd could see it. The prosecutor rushed to steady him, but the judge shoved him away. "Don't touch me," he cried in despair. His mask fell before everyone. The courtroom witnessed his collapse. The defendant wept openly, not from fear, but pride. His daughter achieved the impossible. She brought the mighty judge low and faced him with truth. The judge drew a deep breath but failed. He tried to speak, but no words came. Silence was louder than any verdict, and all saw what it meant. The collapse of a man and his power. The girl smiled softly without vanity. She smiled because her promise was alive. The impossible had begun, and no one would forget it. Never again. The judge clung to the desk, trying to resist. His breath was heavy, burdened by unseen guilt. The crowd watched, torn between laughter and shock, but no one looked away. The impossible was about to unfold. The girl raised her voice, strong and clear. "I said I'd make you kneel." Each word struck like a hammer blow. The judge closed his eyes, wounded. Silence reigned, absolute and suffocating. His legs gave way, staggering back. He tried to stand tall but failed. A guard rushed to help, but was pushed aside. "No!" cried the judge in despair. And then, before all, he fell to his knees. The audience gasped in disbelief. Some screamed, others covered their faces. They had never imagined this sight. Pride had been crushed by truth. The stone had shattered at last. The prosecutor tried desperately to explain. "It's just an illness, nothing more," he shouted, but no one believed him. They all knew it was greater than that. Something beyond reason. The girl neither smiled nor celebrated. Her eyes stayed locked on the kneeling man. There was no arrogance, only faith. Her promise was fulfilled. Truth spoke louder than her voice. On his knees, the judge raised tearful eyes. His face was stripped of masks, no robe, no power, only frailty, and everyone saw it. The man, not the magistrate. The audience murmured in disbelief. Some mocked, others cried, but no one would leave unchanged. They had witnessed the fall. History was written that day. The father, still bound, wept with pride. His heart swelled with joy. The impossible had come true. For once he believed in justice. Hope rose from ashes. The girl closed her eyes calmly. She had nothing more to prove. Her promise stood fulfilled. Now, only the consequences awaited. Consequences that would change everything. The judge stayed kneeling for long seconds. The weight of pride crushed him. The crowd watched, stunned. It was the fall of a giant before a child, and no one would forget it. He rose slowly, wiping his tears. His voice came weak, trembling. "I was wrong," he confessed. "I cannot condemn this man." The room erupted in murmurs. The prosecutor slammed the desk in fury. "This is madness, Your Honor." But his words fell hollow. No one listened anymore. All eyes were on the judge. The judge looked at the accused anew. No contempt, only regret. This man does not deserve chains. He ordered his release at once. The sound of chains falling was a miracle. The father wept as freedom returned. He embraced his daughter tightly. She was his pride, his savior. She restored not only his life but his honor. The child had triumphed. The crowd reacted in chaos. Some shouted, others wept. Many dropped to their knees. The entire courtroom was transformed. Nothing would be the same. The judge breathed deeply, facing the people. "You laughed at this girl, but she spoke truth." His voice shook but rang sincere. "Today, we were all judged by her, and no one dared disagree." The mother embraced her family. It was the miracle she prayed for. Faith had overcome power. Innocence had toppled arrogance. The impossible had won. The girl looked at the judge with compassion. She sought not vengeance, but justice, and justice had been done. The world would not forget this day, the day a judge fell. The courtroom was no longer the same after that day, no longer just marble walls and wooden benches. It had become a stage of tears and faith. Everyone knew they had witnessed the impossible, a judge kneeling before a child. The little girl, fragile in the world's eyes, changed everything. Her voice, once mocked, now rang as truth. The hall that laughed now wept in silence, and none could deny what they saw. It wasn't strength, but courage, purity, and faith. The judge, broken of his pride, would never be the same. His tears testified to rediscovered humanity. And his ruling, for the first time, was just. He freed not only a man, but himself. The weight of pride collapsed at last. The father, free of chains, embraced his daughter. There was no shame in his eyes, only pride. Every tear was boundless gratitude. She restored not only his life, but his honor. The child was his miracle. The mother wept, cradling her small giant. She knew her daughter had carried them all. She was only a child, yet stood as a giant. Her faith proved stronger than marble, stronger than cruelty itself. The audience left changed forever. Some still doubted, others wept in awe, but all carried a seed in their hearts, a seed planted by a child's defiance, and that seed would grow. The whole city buzzed in wonder. The girl who made the judge kneel spread like fire. The impossible had become real, and no one would ever forget it. Her story had changed everything. In that child all saw something greater. It was not just her father who was freed. She became proof that faith conquers, that even the coldest power can melt, that no one is ever too small. The courtroom would never be remembered the same, not for injustice but for a promise kept, not for ridicule, but for tears of change. It was the day a child toppled giants, and the world was never the same again. And if you believe stories like this must be remembered, subscribe now. Here you'll find tales of pain, faith, and redemption. Stories that touch souls and transform hearts. Don't let this flame fade away. Join us, because even the impossible can still happen.